This is Geek Gab with your hosts, Dorrinal and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. Geek Gab for Saturday, March 25th, 2023. Dorrinal, how was your week?
Hey man, it's good. It's good. Good to be back. Tons of stuff going on here in my space, not the ancient website of indie music promoters, but my personal space. Things at the homestead are going interesting. I thought I might fill you in on that. Uh, I've got uh, I've got a sinking house. One of the there's a load bearing wall directly on some floor joists here that have been sinking for a while. So I'm going to figure out what it's going to take to get that repaired. Which if I wanted money this year, that would be a great way to not have any. Oh boy, spring is here. I've been spending a little more time outdoors all week, which is very nice. I'm still working from home in the home office, so when I take a break, I go out in my backyard because it's just the best. I miss people from time to time, but let me tell you what, it's really good. So I'll have more details on my upcoming gardening projects on future episodes. So that's
All
how I'm
right.
doing here. That's how I'm doing here. What about you?
Well, I noticed that none of what you talked about involved um, social media or MMOs, and yet you seem a lot happier. Could you explain that to me? Because I'm just all confused now.
I think we were expecting a relationship to go one way, that relationship to go in parallel, and I forget the word there, but it's actually inverse. It's not proportional.
Uh,
It's inversely proportional, and I would go so far as to say is that there's enough evidence that a reasonable person might infer that there is a strong correlation between those two things. So I'm glad you brought it up. Yes,
a strong inverse correlation.
inverse correlation. Absolutely. I have taken a break from Twitter. I chose to log off for Lent, and I don't think I'm going back. And I know I've said this before, but the last time I rejoined Twitter, I did it to keep in touch with the Bro SR guys and to actually get the game invites for our weekly Trollopulus game. Uh, Now we've switched to using Discord for all that kinds of communication, and the one thing I went back to Twitter for is no longer there. And don't get me wrong, I've heard through those channels that if you enjoy using Twitter for what it's for, which is arguing with people um, and talking about D&D, it's still doing that, but it certainly wasn't making my life any better. And as far as video games go, I will admit to having a bit of a Slay the Spire problem. It's a great way to sort of unwind and kill an hour, but I keep away from any other online gaming, so most other types of video games from now on. And I would say that inverse relationship is pretty strong.
All right. Well, folks, you heard it here. Contrary to what the always honest tech companies say, the tech companies who love you, um, more social media does not make you happier. Who knew?
Who knew? Um, Speaking of big tech companies, I'm dealing with uh, the obsolescence of my software here at the Geek Gab Central, where I do all my away from work computing. And I've got an old machine. I'm still running Windows 7 on this thing, and I'm starting to run into software that I'd like to use being unavailable. Something as simple as keeping a Google Drive in sync with local files is uh, is not possible at this point. So I may be looking at fighting the big tech upgrades. In case you're curious, because I know you're an Apple guy, so this might just be a curiosity for you, but I've been using Windows 11 at work since December, and it's just what you'd expect. It's the next version of Windows. All sorts of bloatware. It's big, ugly garbage in a lot of ways. Um, Windows 10 was great. Admittedly, also full of bloat. Windows 10 was great. I don't. I'm not impressed with Windows 11 yet, although it's kind of a marginal increment, an incremental update of Windows 10, in my opinion. So I'm not excited by it, but I think everybody's using their phones and tablets for so much of everything these days. Your desktop operating system seems a lot less important these days than it used to be.
Well, and I'm going to say this in Microsoft's defense. Um, just let that sink in for a second.
I'm enjoying it.
Um, Apple long ago moved to annual updates to the Mac operating system to where it doesn't really have. I mean, they still do a show every year when they announce as part of a bigger show of announcing updates to, the Watch OS and iOS and iPad OS and so forth. But every year is a new update to the OS. And they do have a lot of features because they update everything in the OS. They update iTunes and Mail and the Core OS, and they do major changes when it's necessary, but it's still all an incremental update. And over the course of if you looked at 5 years, yeah, that's a huge difference. But every year to year, it doesn't seem like that huge a difference. So the fact that Windows 11 over Windows 10 is just an incremental update. Um, being an Apple fan, I can't really say anything because that's the way Apple's doing it too. So,
Yeah, and Microsoft would very much like to copy Apple at this point. You could even see it in their UI, moving all the start buttons down in the bottom middle of the screen, where the Windows Start button was always in the bottom left. But whatever. It feels like some weird late stage cyberpunk dystopia. Oh yeah, it is.
uh, the reason why bottom left is great is because if you throw your mouse really, really hard in that direction, it'll just stop on top of the button. It's called Fitts Law, and it's one of the easier things about GUI design. I'm really hating the direction this conversation took because it's really academic. I'm sorry, folks.
Hey, it's called the Geek Gab, so we had
It,
we
it's
had to
got
go in.
it's got infinite depth because it doesn't matter how hard you throw your cursor, as long as you throw it hard enough, always get there and stay there because your cursor just stops. So you could, no matter how hard you overthrow it, it just stops right there, and you can click down and pow, that menu will pop up. Whereas if it's in the middle of the bottom of the screen, then you have to worry about left and right, you know, zooming in on the target. And that means you have to kind of get finicky with it. Whereas if it's just in a corner, pow, you can just go right there without thinking about it, and it just saves you time. If that's the most important thing on the screen in the OS, which the start button is, it's your main menu where everything is put, then having it in the corner makes it easy for everybody to get to no matter what.
And thankfully, that's an option. In Windows 11, you can switch back to traditional taskbar layout. And as everybody who's reconfigured Windows knows, and this doesn't apply to normies because normies can't find the settings button for anything. But the first thing you do is when you get an update and you realize that they've sort of shifted everything back to their defaults, is that you have to go fix your taskbar options and your folder options and this and that. Or like Video Mirador says, Linux has the reputation of you just you get your UI and all your settings just the way you like them. You get that you create that really nice butt groove in the couch, and you just stay there for years. This is not a endorsement of Linux ever, but
I installed Linux on my Mac in the early days of OS 10.
I work with a lot of service authors, microservice engineers and cloud engineers. They would fully endorse Linux in a data center if you're running cloud services. They say run them on Linux, not Windows. That's the only endorsement of Linux I can give. Hey, let's move on to exciting stuff.
Okay. I am rather more ecumenical now than I was in my young, fiery days. And I guess that's because Apple has kind of gone out and made its bones, and it's not constantly being in threat of, literally shutting down and taking everything away. And people who used to make all those stories about Apple being bought by this company or that company and Apple crashing, they've all had to shut up. So it's really on a stable path right now, and they would have to make lots and lots of big mistakes on a sustained basis for years or decades before the company would be threatened with going out of business. Worldwide, they're just solid. They're one of the leading tech companies now. And when I was buying Macs, they were tiny. They were threatened with death and destruction all around the corner. So, yeah, I don't have to be fiery. I can just say, look, you want to use Windows? Use Windows. It's great. If that's what's best for you and your computing situation, please. I'm not going to argue. You need to use Linux, or you want to use Linux, or you love using Linux, go for it. I'm not going to, badmouth it. I have some opinions about the operating systems, but not so much that I get in arguments about them. I pay attention to what people say, so, I get a feel for what's going on with those operating systems. But I always have to remember that the people who are talking are the people who are dissatisfied, and the people who aren't talking are probably satisfied, and there's a lot of people I don't hear from. So I have to take that into account when people are talking about an operating system. So there's a lot of people who aren't complaining who are satisfied with it, or at least who aren't so dissatisfied that they're complaining. Okay, I'm done.
You are done. I want to talk about D&D. You want to talk
That's
about
it.
D&D?
Show's over, folks. I'm done.
You're done, all right.
Do we want to do the two non-D&D things before we spend the rest of the show on D&D? Because I have a feeling we're going to spend the rest of the show on D&D.
By all means, what's on your mind? D&D's all I've got. What's on your mind, DW?
So I watched The Last of Us, which is that HBO show based on that video game, also called The Last of Us, coincidentally, which was on on Sony's. It was an exclusive to Sony's PlayStation 3 originally, and then they remade it for PlayStation 4, and they remade it for the PlayStation 5. And it was about cordyceps zombies. And I thought it was actually a cool game. It was about zombies who had fungus growing out of their bodies, and this fungus drove the actions of the humans. It grew in their brains and grew out of their bodies and drove the actions of the humans so that they would essentially reproduce more people with cordyceps. And you may have seen little videos on the internet about ants who get cordycepted. That's like being incepted, only with fungus growing out of your head. They get cordycepted and they climb up to a really, really high place, and the fungus sprouts and the spores burst out and fall down on top of the colony, so more ants will be infected and more fungus will grow out of their brain. It's actually quite cool, and it's quite cool concept for zombies, and The Last of Us did it well. While not being in the crowd of people who thought it was the best story ever, the video game story statute of limitations has long since expired on The Last of Us. So this is no longer a spoiler-free zone for the game. If you have wanted to avoid spoilers for this story, you should have played it already by now, because it's been discussed to death on things like game theorists and everybody else in the world. Or recently, this series.
I
So
want to point out, it's been so thoroughly spoiled by now. You don't have to worry. It's been so thoroughly spoiled by now. I actually caught the last 2 episodes of The Last of Us, and I realized, without ever having played the game, oh yeah, this is what happens in the game. That's how well it's been spoiled.
exactly. So I'm telling you I'm going to talk about spoilers, and I don't even care. I'm just letting you know there is sort of a, gentleman's agreement, but it's not even active anymore, folks. The spoiler statute of limitations now is basically 0 days effectively. That gentleman's agreement got blown up in I think whatever day Fallout 4 came out. Because people popped up in my feed and told me everything about it just to spoil it for me, just for
So
spite. So I think that was the last day. And then other people also mentioned similar things that happened to them for TV shows or whatever. There was a concerted campaign to destroy what had been the spoiler statute of limitations that Penny Arcade had declared some years ago. Sorry, that's the world you live in. However, we try to give you a gentleman's announcement so you can avoid this later. But they declare it's the greatest story ever because at the end of the story and at the end of this series, Joel, who is the main character, who at the beginning of the show and the beginning of the game was trying to escape the city that is overrun by cordycepted people, with his brother and his daughter, is shot by U.S. soldiers trying to keep a quarantine cordon around the city in Texas. He is shot at by them, but he escapes with nary an injury. But his daughter, his sweet, sweet daughter, is shot up in his arms and she dies. And it is actually legitimately a heartrending scene. They give you enough time with the daughter, they give you enough time with Joel in this introductory scene to make it heartrending. It is effective, at least for me when I was playing the game. And it is mostly effective in the series, even though by gum and by golly, you want to smack the braces out of her mouth. They don't know how to make, and I'm talking modern writers here, how to make an interesting 11, 14-year-old character, 11 to 14-year-old character, without making them a nag who is smarter than their dad and continually tells them how to live their life. Dad, I made pancakes. Sit down and eat before you go to work, you dummy. It's obnoxious.
it's tiresome.
So, even despite that, when she dies in her father's arms, it is genuinely heartrending and genuinely tragic. But then the Ellie, who is the other main character, Joel and Ellie and Joel. Again, if you've ever heard anything about The Last of Us, you know those are the two main characters, and they go on this long trip cross country because she's immune to the cordyceps fungus, and they're taking her supposedly to a lab run by a rebel group called the Fireflies, where they're going to um, investigate her condition, and then when they investigate her condition, they can maybe make a serum or vaccine or cure for the condition and save some people, or at least vaccinate the rest of the human race so they can begin taking back the planet from these uh,
Fungus.
zombies. But you come to find out in the finale, the final episode, that in order to get the cordyceps because, as I said, not coincidentally a few minutes ago, the cordyceps fungus grows in your brain. So, Ellie, in order to get the samples of the cordyceps virus that are growing in her body, you have to, and I'll wait for you to put this together, cut open her brain. And Joel, who lost his daughter on the very first night that this cordyceps fungus was breaking out in America, had found over this journey across the land from Boston to Salt Lake City, found a surrogate daughter in Ellie. At the beginning, they couldn't stand each other, but they had grown together through their mutual efforts to survive and the difficulties and heartrending situations they went to, the brutal survival and leaning on each other. And he just could not allow Ellie to be murdered or killed, sacrificed, whatever, to be taken apart, to be cut to pieces in order to perhaps, maybe, but probably not, it literally, almost certainly not, save humanity. And that's the thing they gloss over. They present this in game as if it's a sure thing, save humanity or save the girl. But in truth, it is not. Getting the virus out of her head is not going to save, getting the fungus out of her head is not going to save humanity. There is zero chance that that will do any good to anybody except Ellie. Just because of the way funguses operate and such. So he goes to try and get her back, and the fireflies start trying to kill him. So he pulls out, he gets a weapon from one of them and starts fighting back and kills them back because he's really good at it after 20 years of this zombie apocalypse. And his career during this has been going outside the walls of the safety zones that they've established and killing zombies and killing bandits and killing, ravening bands of evil men, and also having a dark past himself. And so he's really good at survival, really good at dealing unto others what they want to deal unto him. So he shoots his way through most of the fireflies and saves Ellie. And there you have it. That's the end of the game. He kills a bunch of people, he saves his new surrogate daughter, and they drive off. So the question being is, they say this is a great story because it's about, what would you do for someone you love? And I don't think that's as deep. I think it's an artificial um, conundrum. It's a contrived situation. And I don't think it's as deep as they think it is. I think it's a great adventure story and a great survival horror setup with fun mechanics, great monsters to fight, great situations that they develop in the game. They do interesting things with the mechanics, they do interesting things with the situations, and it's kind of burdened down by some uh, pretentious bits that don't really enhance the game, and the story does not add to the game. In fact, it kind of detracts from it. But I liked it well enough to play it through to completion 3 times, mostly so I could upgrade all my weapons to the max because they had a new game plus. And HBO did a mostly good job of adapting the game story, except when they veered off of it, especially in episode 3, which made me want to punch people. Literally made me want to punch people, because one of the characters that you really get to meet and like is this big burly guy who you get a truck from, and he is a of the homosexual persuasion in the game,
Of
and
course he is.
his um his close personal friend died in between visits from Joel, and he had a hard time dealing with it, but he's surviving, and um, he toughed it out because he's a tough old bear, and he's admirable. He is surviving. He's doing well. He's in a lot of pain, but he's doing well. And in the episode, they spend the entire episode on his backstory. The the producer not only chose to the producer chose to make it a pan to assisted suicide,
Oh
where
dear.
instead of the uh his close personal friend dying because he was killed by zombies, his close personal friend dying because he drank poisoned wine, uh, that this survivor character poisoned for him. And then that this character, who is the epitome of a survivor, is the epitome of a tough man, who is the epitome of someone who endured so much because of his innate strength, also killed himself. So they
Mm.
completely violated what this character was about in the game. And they make it with all this beautiful music and all this gorgeousness. And isn't this um, so beautiful that these characters chose to die together? And it was just such a betrayal of the character, such a betrayal. You know, they're talking about how awesome and wonderful the story of the game is, and yet they just completely violated uh, one of the cool parts of the game, which is people can survive tragic losses in this horrific zombie apocalypse world. They don't have to give in to despair and murder themselves. And it was terrible. It was absolutely the worst episode. So if you decide to see The Last of Us, and there's a lot of good things in The Last of Us, just skip that episode. I believe it was episode 3. It was absolutely just the worst betrayal of the stories and the characters I've ever seen, and it's useless. It provides nothing to the larger story. They go to this place, they raid his place for tools and stuff. There's no interaction with the character. Whereas in the game, there is interaction with the character, and it's great. It's a superb little scene that they have with him. So they take away all the interaction with this fun character and give you nothing in return. It it has nothing to contribute to the overall story. So just skip it. Um, I enjoyed quite a lot of the series, but my final verdict is probably don't bother, which is sad considering how much money they spent on it and how much fun scenes there actually are in it. But yeah, my final verdict is don't bother. Not worth your time. Oh, and also apparently it's getting really, really good reviews. People like Joel and Ellie. Um, and they are in for a brutal, brutal, hard awakening next season.
Yeah, if they're going to continue to follow the game,
Yes, they
they
absolutely are.
they really should diverge from the happenings in the game.
Neil Druckmann has announced that he doesn't care about the haters. They're heading on.
What a dumbass.
So yeah, that's The Last of Us.
Terrible. Everything except the scenes with Joel that I saw. I only saw, I think, the 2 episodes and bits of another 1 or 2. Anything that didn't involve Joel was stupid and painful. It was the worst thing I'd ever seen. Don't let shitlibs write or showrun anything, and don't watch anything written by them. It's that easy. I'm not even pull punches and going not political.
Troy Baker.
The last the gunning at the end, the big battle with the at the hospital with Joel killing everyone was done in a montage, and it was really cool. I enjoyed it.
They do have a lot of good action scenes spread through the series. The character Marlene, who is the head of the Fireflies, they actually cast the lady who played Marlene in the game. The actress who played Ellie shows up in one scene as Ellie's mom in the show. Troy Baker, who plays Joel, showed up as a character in I think 7th episode. Don't call me on that because I can't remember if they had 8 episodes or 10. So yeah, they really did. They did weird things to try and say, "Look, we're close to the game." Oh, and the show does tell you a lot about the background of the game that is sort of hinted at in the game, but you don't get directly. You don't get directly told in the game, but you do get told in the series. So I'm gonna spoil those for you. The fungus starts in India, and it's a fungus in wheat production that gets in food worldwide. And so people, and they hinted at this in the game, saying they think it might be linked to foodstuffs. It is. It's linked to wheat that gets into some foodstuffs, and that's how they ingest the fungus, and it gets into their system and infects them. Uh, Although why America would be eating India wheat when they got American wheat is kind of confusing to me. And Ellie's mom is pregnant with Ellie, and she gets bit by a cordycepted person when the fireflies come running in, and and she gives birth to Ellie shortly thereafter. The fireflies come in and save Ellie. They do not know that Ellie's has a minute fungal load in her system, and so they have to, you know, deal with the mom in the only way possible. And they raise the daughter, so the daughter grows up with cordyceps in her system, but not enough to make her go full on zombie, but it's enough to um, protect her against the cordyceps, so that's why she's immune. And you actually get that in a couple of documents. You have one of those, what do they call them? Collection quests in the game to gather documents, and the documents refer to Ellie as having the fungus in her system. One of the documents in the original hospital that you go to that's completely abandoned already says that. So there's another document some other place. So yeah, a couple of mysteries that's 3 mysteries in the game cleared up for you that they put in the series, and actually make a scene out of that, out of Ellie's secret origin, why she was immune to the cordyceps. I like the game, okay?
All right. But don't watch the
If I had a
show.
PlayStation, I'd buy it again and play it through some more.
Meanwhile, what was the other thing you wanted to talk about?
Daisy Jones and the Six. I wanted to talk about how they redeemed the characters. They redeemed the characters but killed the plot in the last episode. I was so disappointed. They went modern feminist on the ending of the story. I was just wanted to puke. They have 2 main relationships, romantic relationships, and both of them were ended by the girls because you have to have strong female women finding themselves. And the man literally didn't do anything, and the woman literally slept with a member of the band who wasn't her husband. And yet the show shows it as if he did something all the way wrong and he had to go out and go to rehab and then win her back for doing literally nothing. And I wanted to scream at the television. But I was calm because that's what Daddy Warpig is known for, his calm.
Yep.
Yeah, I was thoroughly disappointed in thoroughly disappointed in how they portrayed that relationship going on the shoals. It's like he did nothing and she left him, and we're supposed to believe he was the bad guy who needs to win her back. And I wanted to scream. She literally went out and slept with a bandmate. He literally did nothing. After months of high tension temptation on tour, he did nothing with anyone. None of the groupies, nothing with this woman he was falling in love with. And he could have. She was begging him to. And he stayed true to his wife. And she threw that in his face. And we're supposed to believe he was in the wrong and she was completely in the right to walk away from the marriage. And I was just like, no, no. I have watched 10 episodes of this. I thought for sure that how they were going to end it was because he did something, right?
Sure.
Was because they got involved. And that would justify her leaving the marriage and him having to maybe try to get her back or whatever. But yeah, I was just disgusted. So
Typical.
it kind of redeemed the characters. They sort of went back to being characters, but at the same time, the plot just fell apart for me in that last episode.
Well, that's too bad. Can't
It
say as I'm
was
surprised.
it was great though. It was so great for so long.
Oh well.
Kind of like the band itself, Daisy Jones and the Six. They were so great for so long, and then they just blew up.
All right. I'm ready. You ready?
Sure.
We had. I want to do mass combat real quick first.
Go for it.
We introduced a little more mass combat in last week's game when we played D&D. And I want to talk about this because it actually relates to the main topic of the show. We had a setup with two giant armies, like 400 Irish on one side and 200 Kenku on the other. And this sort of grew out of the games and the beefs and the action from previous sessions, where we were running around these mountains trying to locate the Kenku lair so that we could stop them from harassing and robbing all the people who live there. And I know we're a little short on time, but I just wanted to say we all sat down and the game master, also known as Macho Mandalf, set out this scenario for us. And we had all the armies lined up, and we played, instead of a traditional dungeon delve, we played mass battles in the mountains, pitting these forces against each other. And you might think, well, anyway, we've got 400 guys on one side, 200 guys on another side, and then there was another battle after that. But you might think that doesn't sound like D&D. But let me tell you, when we got down to it, we didn't even play with miniatures on a map. We played fully theater of the mind in our heads, and the party members in the game, the people who are playing the game, the players got to direct all the troops where they would stand and where they would go, and our overall strategy. And we also got to contribute. Most of the player characters are fighters of some flavor. And so most of us were actually there in the front lines, assisting and trading blows with all the monsters. And I call it out not just because it was fun, but because it really was D&D. Let me explain. First of all, the combat structure that you play a game with, and we're talking Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, also known as First Edition. It scales up absolutely perfectly from a group of 5 guys, 5 to 10 guys on each side, to 400 guys on one side. With a really simple scaling, you just use a ratio of 20 to 1. And so instead of 5 to 10 guys versus 5 to 10 guys, you've got 5 to 10 units of 20 men each versus 5 to 10 units of 20 men each. And the combat worked flawlessly. Granted, Mandel filled in the gaps a little bit with some rules imported from chainmail. There are a couple of things, ambiguities, you might say, in the AD&D guide that he just filled in with chainmail. And the battles ran the same. And yes, Jeffro's got the flavor details. It wasn't just a mountain. We found a volcano shaped like Mel Gibson with smoke coming out of his ears. Man, if you know, you know. But the combat procedures worked flawlessly. Same initiative order. Both armies declare what they want to do in the next minute. The initiative is determined, which side gets to impose their will first, and then execute the actions. The only difference being, rather than having one guy versus one guy, you've got, units of 20 men each. And so you simply do things like roll one attack roll for an entire unit, right? And just apply that damage to the whole other unit. And the cool thing that the way we integrated the leaders was we were able to contribute where each of the players also made a individual attack roll. And our damage was added to the damage of the unit as a whole. So a unit of 20 men might fight as if they were like a one hit dice creature, because it's 21 hit dice creature. But then like the level 1 fighter was permitted to add his value into all of that. Effectively doubling the strength of that unit, if you really think about it. And it was great because he said, your damage is going to be divided like everybody else's, but if I add your damage into your unit's damage and that's enough to wipe out an enemy unit, well, it's wiped out. And that happened repeatedly. The player characters were able to turn the battle without having any crazy spells. Notice that there were no magic users in this battle at all. Just the pure martial prowess of high, or level. I think we had a level 3 ranger and a level 4 paladin and everything. It just scaled up. And I know that Warpig, you missed most of that battle. We ruled your cleric was busy healing the wounded in the second, third ranks, but everybody got involved, and it was a lot of fun. I think that that's the sort of thing that you should allow to develop naturally in your game. Like let these big armies build up. Let fighter characters build up their own mercenary companies and armies, and take the battle. Take the battle out there, because if you're wandering in the wilderness, you're not going to encounter a group of 10 orcs like you would in a dungeon. You're going to encounter 30 to 300 orcs. What does that mean? That's what it means. It means you better come prepared. Anyway, I want to call that out for two things. So I put a link to the Dungeon Master's session report in the show notes on YouTube. So go check that out if you're curious about the rules and procedures he used. If you want to use that in your game, do it. And the other thing is that it is exactly the sort of thing Jeffro's talking about, Jeffro Johnson talks about in his new book, How to Win at D&D, which we mentioned last time. Daddy Warpig, you were the first person in the world to order it, and you've gone through your copy, haven't you?
I have read it. And what's ironic about this is Jeffro hasn't even gotten his copy. I got my copy like 3 days later after I ordered it. And I don't know if that was just Pylum Press being really nice to me and sending it to me quickly, or what, but I got mine 3 days later, and I read it. Now, here's the thing about the book. If you have been neck deep in the BroSR or in BroSR discussions, it's possible that you might have come across all these concepts, but you will not have come across them organized, well explained, with all of these examples set out this way, and with the cool illustrations in the book. They are just not going to be there. And if you haven't been absolutely lockstep keeping up with the Bro SR, then a lot of, if not all of this material is going to be brand new. So yes, I would absolutely recommend how to win at D&D. It explains where all these rules come from, how they all exist. So it begins with the history of D&D all the way back as far as, you know, Bronstein, and even a little bit back further than that. Dave Arneson's contributions to it, and David Wesley, where role-playing games themselves come from. And how one-to-one time, and I love this, how keeping constant time works. Now, we saw this week a video released by, and you're going to have to help me on the name here, Matt Colville.
Matt Colville.
Who is he?
Matt Colville. That's a great. I love that you asked that question. He's a game master and YouTuber who specializes in game mastering advice, tips and tricks. He's published a number of books. He's actually the biggest name in DM advice and DM videos. Like this is the guy. Everybody I've talked to, outside of our group, who is interested in D&D at all, they watch his stuff. They refer to his stuff. So he's basically the most popular, probably the cream of the crop when it comes to that sort of thing. I think in terms of popularity or notability, Matt Mercer from Critical Role is more well known because of the popularity of Critical Role. But people who are looking on YouTube, they're like, hey, how do I deal with a problem player, or what's this rule, or something like that, or DM tips or whatever. Matt Colville's #1 guy, which is really interesting. It's interesting that you didn't know, because old players and grognards like us don't necessarily encounter that sort of thing, or we don't necessarily need that sort of. Anyway, I've gone on too long. That's who Matt Colville is.
Okay.
He's the type of person who would pick up on this stuff independently, which is, I believe, what you were getting to.
Well, I'm of the opinion he tripped over one-to-one time from Questing Beast and the other dude. Who was the other dude?
I don't remember.
I don't either. I'm sure Jeffro does. He can toss it up in the chat. And was ruminating on it, and he mentioned that Castle Amber, or Chateau d'Umberville, or whatever it was, which was an expert module for Moldvay Basic X, Moldvay BX, not BECMI, Super Geek Mike, there we go, who both stumbled across one-to-one time in a blog which was not mentioned, but which we all know what it was. So there's a clear chain of incidences. Some group made discussing one-to-one time popular. An unknown group of unknown members in an unknown time caused a massive controversy with one-to-one time and was universally denounced that one-to-one time was ever a thing, that nobody ever used it back then, not even Gygax himself. And despite all the quotes in the DMG, one-to-one time was never a thing. And then Super Geek Mike and Questing Beast both went and made videos about how they discovered lurking in the pages of the DMG one-to-one time and how one-to-one time could make a massive difference to your campaign, and how they just happened to discover it on, sure, maybe some people might have discovered it first, but they weren't sure who did, so they didn't want to give anybody credit. And then Matt Colville said, hey, I was reading this module and they assume that there's going to be one-to-one time between sessions, so your players have a chance to rest, so your players have a chance to heal, they have a chance to. And I didn't watch the video. This is one of those instances. A lot of people mistake disliking something as thinking that the other person is bad. I don't think Matt Colville is a bad person, and I don't dislike him, but I just can't stand looking at his beard.
He's I think I understand what you're saying.
I'm sure he's a nice guy, and I'm sure he, whatever. I don't dislike him. I don't hate him, but his beard just crawls up inside my spine, and it just, I don't like it. I can't watch it. I can't watch him on a video. I'm sorry. I'm not.
I understand.
So he didn't claim to have, discovered one-to-one time. He's just saying, yes, I have found evidence in this module that they expect you to have 1 day of downtime per 1 day in the module. And, that's great because it really does give your characters time to recuperate and recover from all the rough adventuring going on. So, that's a huge video. So all of a sudden, this has grown into a not just a conversation where certain people are being lambasted for daring to think that this is even possible, that Gygax would never ever do it, but thinking that, hey, this was simply the way it was done. So much so that it was an assumed part of writing a module, even for BX, not just for the rules for AD&D. And this video came out after How to Win at D&D.
It's like an unknown group, a shadowy cabal of ne'er-do-wells are influencing the zeitgeist.
Yeah. Putting things out there that had not been out there before. So, it has bubbled up from the depths, and I guess that's making it respectable now. And the best that the people who were on the other side saying that that wasn't true or that was never done or whatever can say now is, well, you guys didn't discover it. You guys get no credit for it. You guys had nothing to do with it. Whatever. All I'm going to say is How to Win at D&D says differently. So it's a great book. It points at even more principles of making a great role-playing game besides one-to-one time during downtime. I mean, there's still more battles to come. Like people who keep on saying that D&D is a high fantasy game. D&D is not a high fantasy game. It's not a superhero game. D&D is a game about freebooters. It's a game about tomb robbers. It's a game about mercenaries. It's a game about freelancers for hire. It's a game about Fafford and the Grey Mouser. It's a game about Conan. It's a game about they spend their time when they're not out getting gold from tombs, carousing. That's literally the rules in AD&D. Your upkeep goes to keeping up your weapons, and the rest of the money goes to carousing. Exceptions made for the monk and the paladin, and even the clerics, or more like Friar Tuck, who himself enjoyed more than a little of the tankards of beer. Okay? People who say that AD&D is about abstemious heroes who sit around contemplating the goodness of the universe, like, I don't know, Joan of Arc. AD&D is not Joan of Arc, okay? You are not playing Joan of Arc unless you're a paladin. AD&D is about Conan. Seriously, that's the best I can come up with.
Absolutely. In fact, we've had some discussions lately on the the harlots table in AD&D. The urban encounters table are meant to simulate Lankmar from Fafford and the Grey Mouser stories. The fighting man was made as a reflection of John Carter of Mars and Conan. The the cleric is a Van Helsing demon hunter, vampire hunter type, right? We know where these influences came from, even as those influences fade further and further into memory, right? It's not necessarily a superhero party. It's not supposed to be. Every game isn't supposed to be a Tolkien pastiche.
I mean, that's so dour and serious. Don't get me wrong, I love Tolkien and I loved the Tolkien movies. I said it. But if you're gonna sit there and be grim, Aragorn sitting in the corner, grimly contemplating the broken sword and your destiny to be king even though you don't want to be king, and how awful it feels to be separated from your one true love and the fate of all Middle Earth resting on your shoulders. That's not D&D. In fact, it's not AD&D. It's you're not supposed to have the fate of the world resting on your shoulders all the time. You're supposed to be going out and getting treasure and getting and having fun because it's a game.
Yeah.
If you're taking it too seriously, if your characters have to take it too seriously, it's it's really not AD&D. Your characters are freebooters. They're adventurers for hire. They're mercenaries, grave robbers, privateers. They're not evil necessarily, but they're also not, they're not, you know,
Sorry, they're not. So I mean, and that's the heart of it. You know, the type of D&D that's been presented isn't what it was originally written, and it doesn't need to be. And I think this is the most important part for me. If you go and try to imitate those kinds of games, those kinds of stories, you'll find the game better suited for those stories, and you'll find them enjoyable. You know, RPGs already provide a better gaming experience than, or a different gaming experience, a better gaming experience than just about anything you could play. But if you embrace those influences and you embrace the mass combat or the war game uh, backdrop and the weird fiction and everything, you're gonna have a superior experience, and it opens up your games to all sorts of other great things like open tables. You're going to be able to hold more players. You're going to be able to have an always on game. You're going to have people messaging you on Discord and on your text messages, talking about what they want their characters to do in downtime. It's just everything gets better.
you know what player characters should be serious about? Revenge on people who did them wrong. Not the end of the world. They should be serious about a petty official who got in their way, uh, or someone who stole something from them, um, or charged them too much. They should be serious about, you know, finding the jewel of Schlampur because a daughter of, a local baron um, will uh, will marry them if they bring back this fabulous jewel. I mean, these are adventures. These are adventures.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they should be serious about uh, proving someone wrong about something. You'll never make it to to the witch's hut in the middle of the woods. You're far too weak. Oh yeah, we'll do it right now. they slam their mugs down on the table and they drunkenly walk out of the inn. I mean, obviously, these are things the players have to decide for themselves.
Yeah.
But without game masters interfering and giving them goals, yeah, players can and do get angry at things, get angry at people, and want to go prove them wrong or um, destroy their lives or frame officials for something or whatever. That's when players have fun. Is when they can go out and embarrass someone who's ticked them off royally. Um, or when they found out that they sold a gem to a merchant that was actually way more expensive than they thought it was, and the merchant just lied and rooked them out of a bunch of money. Yeah, players get mad at that sort of thing, and they're willing to go to great lengths to get even. And you don't have to make an adventure if they decide to do that. You just have to roll with that as a DM. You just have to say, "Okay, guys, this is your plan? Yeah, that's our plan. Okay." And let them go after it. You don't have to channel them, you don't have to lead them on, you just have to let them decide to do it. Um, and that's what players should be serious about is things they want to do, not what the DM wants them to do.
And the game in question needs to just let the game master handle that. That's all.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be anything fancy or anything. You don't need any special narrative controls. Just let the game master figure out what happens when the players do something.
I mean, you guys never entered a city that you didn't depose the mayor.
I remember those days.
And I didn't even expect it anytime. It wasn't set up that way. It just happened. So
Well,
yeah,
that and this comes from experience, right? We're not just blowing smoke at anything. We're not just saying, oh, this book is good because of that or whatever. We're not just saying this to say this. Like these are legitimately good things about a well-made game that we have experienced firsthand. It's everything that we've been talking about and everything that uh, you see in the book, How to Win at D&D. We've done it. This is not a theory book. This is an after action report. This is what playing these types of games is like. This is how you recreate those cool stories. This is how you let your players free and have as much fun as they can. And and like you said, you completely recommend the book. I love it.
yep.
It's about time to wrap up. GW, anything else you want to add about the book or anything?
Um, I'm assuming we're going to put a link to the page where they can buy it of the.
That's right. There's a link in the show notes. Go check it out.
Okay. Yep. I'm done.
Or me too. Hey, it's been great talking to everybody. We had everybody in the chat. Check out the live chat afterwards. We had Jefffer himself and a bunch of other great people in the chat. Big shout out to him. Big shout out to Neil from Pylum Press, publishing the book. And big shout out to Macho Mandalf for running that great session last week. That another demonstration of those concepts. Really good stuff. And I hope everybody listening later enjoyed it. Most of all, Daddy Warpig, thanks for being an awesome host. It's always good to hang out and talk about gaming with you.
This is where I talk, isn't it?
That's it.
All right, folks. Thanks for turning in live and participating in the live chat. Thanks for everyone who will listen later. This has been Geek Gab for Saturday, March 25th, 2023. You can catch us here on youtube.com/geekgab. Once again, that is youtube.com/geekgab. Just about every week at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And we've got some great guests that are coming around to high probabilities of being on the show. We will let you know when that firms up. And we are here. I already did that one, didn't I? Dang it.
Sure.
All right, folks, we are signing out for today. Oh, yeah, we're available on the SoundCloud.com, on the Apple iTunes Store, and on the Google Play Store. Check us out on the device of your choice or on the web, or download us to your computer, because that's how awesome we are. We are signing out for today, but don't you worry, don't you fret. We will be back.